want to welcome everyone to this month's African American Network Buffalo Soldier podcast. And welcome, Dr. Salisbury. You will be officially welcomed by Captain Stowe in just a moment. This is our November podcast, and we appreciate all the Buffalo Soldiers who've joined us. And I'm General Sandifer, and I lead the podcast team, and I appreciate everyone working with us in a very cooperative way. So what I'm going to do is to turn it over to Captain Stowe, who will share our platform with us and officially introduce our guest today. Captain Stowe.
Thank you, Brigadier General Sandifer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the African American Network of Kern County Buffalo Soldiers podcast this day, November 18th, 2023. I'm Captain LaShawna Stowe of the Buffalo Soldiers, and I will be your moderator for today. The subject of our podcast today is the importance of ethnic studies in academic institutions, and we have a special guest with us today, and I'm going to start out by introducing her. Her name is Dr. Tracy Salisbury, Department Chair of Ethnic Studies at CSUB, Academic Senator at Large, VPC Committee Member, President, CFA Bakersfield Chapter, Co-Chair Black Caucus, CFA statewide. We also have with us our Buffalo Soldier panel, and I will introduce each of them. Major General W.A. Slade, Brigadier General Everly, Brigadier General Sandifer, and myself, Captain L. Stowe. Before we go into the prelude, I would like to just give a moment to Dr. Salisbury to introduce yourself and to also probably define ethnic studies for us and also what it means to you and why it's important.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm very appreciative of the invitation. Actually, pretty excited. I'm a bit of a fangirl of the Buffalo Soldiers history. So this is sort of a very exciting moment for me. As you said, I'm Dr. Tracy Salisbury. I'm originally from Los Angeles. So I'm very glad after many years to be back at home in California. I've been at Cal State Bakersfield for 7 years. I got tenured last year, which is a pretty exciting thing. The Department of Ethnic Studies became official at CSUB in 2022. We are currently working to build our department. We're going to be offering 2 degrees, one in a BA degree in Ethnic Studies and a BA degree in Latinx, Chicanx Studies. Ethnic Studies is a discipline that began over 50 years ago that was asked for, advocated for, and fought for by college students. Starting up at San Francisco State, which makes it a very unique discipline because it's the only academic discipline that was fought for and worked for by young people. It makes up 4 different disciplines. Sometimes they'll be called different names, but as CSUB is doing it, it's Black Studies, Asian American, Asian Pacific Islander Studies, Native American Indigenous Studies, and then Latinx and Chicanx studies. So it's those 4 principal studies that works together to create an intersectionality view of history, culture, politics, socioeconomic class, race, class, and gender. It encompasses just the changing of the narrative of centering the voices and experiences of those particular ethnic groups. It's not trying to change history, is trying to broaden and enhance history and make sure that these voices are not forgotten. In many cases, we are not just recentering, say, Black history, we are revitalizing it and introducing it to a new generation. I actually love what I do. I love teaching ethnic studies, in particular Black studies. I love bringing American history to the forefront because I'm a firm believer that American history can be taught from the eyes of people of color. I'm a Civil War buff, and I love teaching the Civil War from the Black perspective. In my view, in some ways, it's much more interesting and more rich, but we can argue about that and debate about that. But that's the importance of ethnic studies, and that's my passion, is to introduce younger people and value the voices of older folks who actually experience some of the history.
Thank you so much. I just feel educated just from your introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the prelude, and then for that, all Buffalo Soldiers were asked to have questions ready for you. So we'll go into the questions. Ethnic studies considers the study of the histories, experiences, cultures, and issues of racial ethnic groups in the United States. In the United States, the comparative study of ethnicity can be focused on four historically defined ethnic core groups: Native Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, and Latino or Latina Americans. So from this point, we are all going to start beginning with questions. I'll open it up to the Buffalo Soldiers.
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
With the Indian affirmative action, have you seen a change in ethnic studies on the campuses?
Not necessarily in the field of study, but what because number one, California has already been impacted by the legislation Proposition 209, which has failed. Proposition 209 was supposed to be no more race-based admissions, but of course, as all powerful structures have learned to work around it, this has not benefited particularly Black students. So what Black students have chosen to do in many cases is leave California, which is problematic. They've chosen to go to other institutions where they will not be in a minority, a super minority. It has also created segregation in certain spaces because now students who cannot afford to go away choose to go to California institutions that are within their regional area instead of branching out where you had a chance to go through the whole CSU or UC system. Where ending affirmative action hurts is that it wasn't based on a true reality. It was based on white students being unhappy that they are no longer privileged. And it had very little to do with empowering students of color. Affirmative action has always been under assault by the power structure when they have to compete. So when things became more competitive and students of color began to compete on a scale that put pressure on students who had been favored before, then they ran to the courts. We have to remember the ending of affirmative action was done with a highly well-funded and well-litigated organization. This was not one student going in with a regular lawyer. This was a campaign to end affirmative action that they believe will once again create opportunities just for predominantly white students to go to college. I hate to tell them that genie is out of the bottle. There's a responsibility on us as educators, as parents, as leaders, that there are ways for our kids to still go to college. And we need to start applying pressure, particularly in California on some of these CSUs, to do a better job with Black students, period.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Salisbury, my question, my first question is that why is it that when ethnic studies is mentioned among groups of people, that some people think it is only a reference to Black history, African American history? That's my first question.
Beautiful question. Well, number one, to be remotely honest, as I tell my students, Black people have always been the canary in the coal mine. You know, that you have to explain that reference to them, that they used to send canaries into the coal mine for the coal workers to make sure there was enough fresh air for them to be able to work in those spaces. Well, Black folks have always been the test of American democracy and patriotism and its Constitution. I recently had the pleasure of visiting the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C., and it has a very beautiful setup where it has every document, legislative document that we claim makes America a unique institution, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of this legislation, and then it's surrounded by all of these examples of discrimination, racial hatred, and structural racism against Black people. And it really is a great juxtaposition of how it shows America has never kept its promise to Black Americans, and no matter what we've done. Black Americans are the only racial group that has served in every military action the United States has done. We have repeatedly been promised freedom by serving this country and did not receive it. We still disproportionately serve in the military in disproportionate numbers to our population. So we have always bought into this American ideal, but America has not always paid us back with what they claim it gave. So when we say ethnic studies makes people nervous because it's enforcing a view of history that has been ignored. It's like the African proverb, until the lions get their storytellers, the hunter's story always prevails. So when we have ethnic studies, particularly Black studies, we are raising a significant challenge to the story of American exceptionalism. It's easy to say you're exceptional when you relied on free Black labor. It's easy to say you're exceptional when you relied on the destruction and the pressurizing of a group of people to build your country. We don't want to talk about that. So that's what makes people nervous. I tell them there's no reason to be nervous because young people are very open-minded, and they're oftentimes very angered when you have these discussions about their histories and you share the information with them that yes, you too built this country. Yes, you too belong here. And that's the point of ethnic studies. So I'm less worried about the people that are mad about it. I really point out, why are you mad? There's no reason to be afraid of history. There's no reason to be afraid of facts. But, we know why you're afraid, but that's not our problem.
Okay. And another question is how programs like the Ethnic Studies program at CSUB's campus, how does it impact the rest of society, those who are outside of the classroom, those who may be parents of students, grandparents, or children, etc.?
Oh, another beautiful question. One of the things that's really unique about ethnic studies as a discipline and each of the disciplines within it, because some schools have long-term ethnic studies departments, also have separate departments of, say, Black studies or Pan-African studies or Africana studies or Native American studies. They have separate departments. But ethnic studies is also one of the unique aspects is that it is an activist discipline. It is required to go out into the community. It is required to share with the community. So as our department gets on, you'll see more of us in Bakersfield, in Kern County, in the Central Valley, that we will be reaching out to the community to bring the whole concept of what we call town to gown, is to bring the town to the campus. That is my goal and my mission as the department chair. We are the only majority minority department on the entire campus. So I've hired an amazing faculty who I just can't wait to unleash, and they can't wait to get out there. We've been making some strides of getting out there. We're recently at the No Sister Left Behind conference. We'll be attending much more events in town. We were recently, some of our faculty last night were at the Kern County Educators for Ethnic Studies event. We'll be out. I just did the Democratic Women of Kern County. We're working with you guys. We're hoping to bring the wonderful history of Bakersfield, because there is a rich history here, to our campus, because we want our students to understand we're building a community here in Bakersfield. We're not building a space for you to necessarily get out of Bakersfield. We're building a community for you to go out into the Central Valley and build your family, build your community, because one day Bakersfield will be a majority minority city, and change is coming. It's slow, but change is coming. And people need to be prepared to go out there and do so.
I'll let my comrades ask some other questions. I do have a couple more, but
Sure.
Go ahead.
Did you have a question, Brigadier General Everly?
Well, I think that you kind of answered one of the questions that I was that you alluded to, is the fact that in terms of the history of Bakersfield, I grew up here and went to school here and remember what it was like, and who could share that story better than the university, and the strides that have been made and the patterns and how things have changed so much, in Bakersfield. That's just amazing. If you could address that, just the changes of since,
It's like I'm learning myself. And what I tell young people is there's value in two spaces as an educator. Yes, I've got a lot of pieces of paper that says I'm a very well-informed and well-taught young lady, okay? But there's two people I can learn from. That is my own students, and then the elders, the keepers of our history, our ancestors, and our elders that are still alive and out there. Because if you can't keep learning as an educator, you need to retire. So that is the importance of bringing the community in. I've been very lucky since I've been here in Bakersfield is to be embraced by a number of people in the community who have been supportive of me as I've gone through my tenure process, who now it's time to pay back and bring them into the campus. You know, some of the oldest churches are here in Bakersfield. There is an amazing untapped questioning of what Black farm workers felt like in this city that celebrates you know, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and the Latino farm workers. But that's another challenge of ethnic studies, is that even within our own groups, there's kind of an oppression Olympics that we tend to forget because we want one group to shine more than the other. You know, it's like they say, you're only one foot on the neck away from being an oppressor. So we have to remember. So I am interested in what Black farm workers felt about how these movements went. We don't talk about them. We're just beginning to talk about how the land was stolen from Black farmers. You know, when we talk about affirmative action, nobody wants to talk about how white farmers have been subsidized for decades at the expense of Black farmers, and that there is a uniqueness. If Black people don't share their history, it gets forgotten. We are very lucky. If an example is the Tulsa Race Massacre, most of the world was extremely ignorant of this until a TV show made it the center of its first episode. And most people thought it was fiction. And then it opened up this history. We are very lucky that members of the Tulsa Race Massacre, who are over 100 years old, are still alive to talk about it and to talk about the generational wealth that was taken away in that massacre and how they spent the last 100 years to rebuild it. So to have those elders around, to be around long enough to get civil rights lawsuits going, to challenge the country, the state that did that to them, and to bring that history back. Otherwise, it would be lost. It would be lost history. So part of ethnic studies responsibility is not allow the histories of these powerful ethnic groups to be forgotten.
I have a question for you, Dr. Salisbury.
Sure.
In The Souls of Black Folk by W.B. Du Bois, he writes in a part about when slavery came to an end or it was abolished, and they were trying to bring college-educated African Americans back to the South to teach. And they found that not only did they need to teach them, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic, but they also had to teach to the spirit of the Black man or the Black child. It was more than just educating their minds. Do you see ethnic studies now as something that is important to our children, not only, as I said, to teach them in terms of education and college, but to build them up, to know where they're from, what their capabilities could be, just by learning the history of those who came before them? I'm just trying to see if you see a correlation there between what happened then and now.
Beautiful questions. I'm having a good time here. Look at it this way. You're looking at the three fathers of this idea who did not necessarily get along when they were together. You have Du Bois, you have Marcus Garvey, and you have Booker T. Washington. Okay, folks got mad at Booker T. Washington because he realized that slaves were not prepared for higher education, that skill sets was the most important thing because they needed to take care of themselves and have opportunity. We had 98% illiteracy at the end of slavery. But Du Bois, who viewed it as education was powerful, that you couldn't take away, though that knowledge, that book knowledge, that teaching knowledge was important. Okay. And then you had Garvey, who very much believed in the spirit of Black people and what Black people were and what their history was, and that they were not just what people would simply call a conquered people, that they were a people of a rich history and they were not monolithic, and that they had an international flavor along with this American ideal of what a Black person was. So if you look at the modern era, those three things have come together and they're no less important, okay? It is very important for our young Black people to have skills. You know, it is very frustrating, and I you know, I always laugh now. I said, well, I'm turning into my mom and my grandparents because I go, well, what do you mean you don't know how to check your oil? You know, how do you mean you don't know how to, you know, fix a toilet. These are basic things that Black people had to know because we were denied those services. So you had to learn how to fix it yourself. And that's one of the signs of progress, is the fact that some of our young people are becoming privileged, that they don't know how to do some basic service things. And they don't know what a screw, the difference between the two screwdrivers. They don't know the knowledge. And then it's the lack of reading. It's we're losing with young people on reading because they got Twitter, 240 characters, TikTok, something can be 30 seconds. So we have to remind them again that reading was precious. Reading was precious to Black people. It was under the threat of death to teach a Black person to read. So when I hear any Black students saying they don't like to read, I go, oh my goodness. And the story still holds true, that young Black people have identity issues, that they don't know who they are, and they don't know how to feel about who they are or their space and place in the world. And so all three of these things are really coming together in the current era, because there's so much opportunity. There's so much coming at them. There's so much going on in this world. One of the things about discrimination, it made life pretty simple, because every day your job was to protect your family and protect yourself from discrimination. When there's kind of a looser version of discrimination, and really you're immersed in a structure that is not conducive to your success, it's harder to see. And so when they struggle, they're not quite sure how to grasp it. So it is on us. It is very much on us to be more positive. It is, look, I was a Civil War park ranger in a conservative park, okay, in Fredericksburg, Virginia, okay, the site of where the South actually had several victories, okay, and this is where Stonewall Jackson was killed. I'm actually a Stonewall Jackson semi-expert on him. When I see their pride in rocking their Civil War gear, I always wondered, why are we not doing the Buffalo Soldier thing? Why are we not doing more of the Black units in the Civil War? And it's because they don't want us there. They make those spaces uncomfortable. But what I did as a ranger was I incorporated those stories into my narrative when I've had guests, because we let them push us out of the way, and we have to stop letting them do that. It's just that simple. And that's what Garvey did. Garvey with the parades, and people said, oh, it's a big deal. But, Garvey appealed to a forgotten group of people. Black people don't have to be a monolith, but we should have more respect for one another as a monolith. That would be helpful. I hope that answered your question. Got rambling there.
It did. No, I love it. Thank you. I have one more question. What would you say to parents of children who are not yet in college? How do you think they should prep their kids to wanting to be or wanting to go to an ethnic studies course? How can we increase that?
I would say, if they're young, read to them. Don't let them, there's a combination. Parenting is difficult. I won't pretend that parenting is not difficult, and mentoring is extremely difficult. And young people have lots of distractions. One of the things is I would watch how much TV, video games, phone, all of that is part of the modern world. There's no pretending that can go away, but make kids unplug. Make kids unplug. And then make them do something they may not like. We're getting to the point that I had to laugh because, we were in this museum, this beautiful African-American history museum, and I was struck by something. There's an Emmett Till exhibit. They have his coffin, the first coffin, because he was disinterred for the civil rights case, and then they put him in a different, newer coffin to preserve. And the coffin is, and it's an emotional space. And you really understand how young he was. That even though he was 14 at the time he died, he had just turned 14. He was still really just 13. He had just been 14 less than a month. And when you think about the average kid that's 13 now and how much they're exposed to, but they may not know a thing about Emmett Till. And I was able to tell my friend that was with me that, the Jet magazine photos, I remember being shown that by my grandmother. And when we would go down south, this is what she would send us off with to behave. And we would behave because we would be like, you don't want to end up like Emmett. You better not do that. And that was a historical way of sharing. It's sort of like the driving while black tale. You have to look out for yourself. You have to look, for this kind of thing. We want our kids to be safe. And in a lot of ways, they are really safe in a very different way. But we need to expose them to the realities of the world. Sometimes it's a very hard history, but then you can share it with the good things. There's lots of good things. There's beautiful art. There's beautiful music. There's, we love sports, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about the beauty of it. Let's talk about Michael Jordan's work ethic, Kobe Bryant's work ethic, not just so much the money and the things that we see, the trappings of what success is, but how do you get to that success? What is the sacrifices made to get to that success? I think, it's like mentoring young black men. We want to bring more young black men on our campus. Because for some of the young black male students, they've heard from enough black women. They've had some woman in their face constantly. And, the primary majority of black professors at CSUB are female. And we love those guys, and I'll run after you on campus. I have no problem. I'll be like, hey, you come here. And they'll be like, what does she want? And, somebody will tell them, that was Dr. Salisbury. She's trying to help you, dummy. And, I will do that. But I do understand the importance of them seeing a black man who has successfully navigated the work and the family space. It means something. And I mean, the real guys, not the suits, the real guys out there that, work all week, can actually cook something if they had to cook it, can take care of the car. It shows them the balance of life. So we don't get as frustrated as we do. I think those life lessons is something I think is a little bit that's missing right now, is that, we want to share that. We do etiquette stuff from time to time, to show them how to eat at a table if you're invited to a banquet. The kids don't know the difference between the forks. Whose fault is that? Practice that as a parent. How do you answer the phone? How do you communicate? We all code switch. We all have black vernacular. I lived 10 years in North Carolina. I fall into my accents and those sayings, and, okay, there's nothing wrong with speaking the Queen's English either. You just know the appropriate time and space. But reading is important. And I grew up with that. We didn't have a lot of money. Reading was the adventure. I knew about Bass Reeves when I was a kid because it shocked me that black people were cops. And and then you grow up and you watch Combat and all these other shows and F Troop, and there's no black soldiers.
No.
So, my dad pointed out, there was these Buffalo soldiers and they were called this. And, and to see a buffalo, oh my God, to really see a buffalo and the power of that, and that you guys were honored by being, the Native Americans viewed you as the power of this particular creature. I was like, wow. And, we have to see the world, even if your world is a small place or it's a big place. I just spent part of the summer in South Africa. And when I was in Johannesburg, it took me about 45 minutes to realize we weren't seeing any more white people, that they had just gone away. And my group, we kept talking about how relaxed we felt, that the pressure wasn't there, the pressure to compete, the pressure to always be on guard, the pressure to look over your shoulder. They were such joyous people. And they are facing severe socioeconomic problems. Housing, it's dangerous. But they had a joy. They had a peace. And we enjoyed such wonderful conversations with them. And I was like, well, Black Americans are not this relaxed and stressed and not living their lives. We live, sometimes we work to live. And that's not the goal. And I was very struck by the differences. So, long story short, it's we have work to do, even though we have an astounding amount of privilege in comparison to our cousins in South Africa. I think they're living a better quality of life.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I think we're losing a lot of our history because we don't sit down at the table as a family anymore. We used to sit down to eat. Parents, grandparents were there, and they told us what life was like for them. I don't see that so much anymore. You know, the kids are running one way, you're going another way. Dinner might be McDonald's or something down the road, but we no longer get together as a group. And I think a lot of our history is being lost there. Because I can remember sitting at the table with my great-grandfather, and he was telling me something about Black Seminoles. I go, what in the world is he talking about? Who or what is a Black Seminole? And then he went on to explain to me how the slaves, when they got away in Florida and other areas, and they actually joined with Seminoles and became a part of the Seminole culture. You know, and this just surprised me because you coming from California, going to Texas, and him telling me this, you didn't hear about this in California. And this is where I started picking up and learning about our Black history. We produce a monthly newsletter, and one of the things you had mentioned was Buffalo Soldier Day. And okay, that date, July 1992, I believe is when Buffalo Soldier Day was created. But we still don't enjoy that day as we do other days. We just went through Veterans Day. Well, Veterans Day, we honor all soldiers for their sacrifices. But it wasn't until recently that we started recognizing and thanking the Buffalo Soldiers for the tremendous contributions they have made in our history. And I think it's very sad that we are losing Black history. And if it wasn't for individuals like you and your knowledge, heaven only knows where we would be or where we would be going. And so myself, I would love to be able to come out there to the campus to sit down in one of your classes and just listen to you and your stories on how and where Black history is going.
Well, and I appreciate the power of what you're saying, the emotion of what you're saying. In a lot of ways, this is how I have to look at it. Modernization and opportunity have changed the Black community. We have to acknowledge that. Remember, our kids weren't allowed to do soccer and basketball except in a segregated space. So now that this is open and now that we are celebrated for athleticism, those opportunities have opened the door, and parents have taken advantage of music opportunities. My sister plays the cello. My sister speaks several languages. The opportunity to go study abroad. These openings have changed the dynamic of what family looks like for us and what opportunity looks like for us. So this is why education really has to be grounded in bringing those groups together. So we may not have the same dinner table, but we could have the community table. So that's why we've done community movie nights, where we bought out tickets to Black Panther and then had a discussion afterwards. And, we wanted to do something for The Color Purple, but it's kind of tough because it's out opening on Christmas Day during the break. But we want to keep those doors open. It's like we bought out the theater and we did The Woman King. And because most young people and a lot of adults had never heard of the Dahomey Warriors. this is not a surprise because these are not standard things taught in history in schools, and which is why it's deeply important to get ethnic studies in K through 12. We have to fight better. One of the things I feel a sense of urgency about is getting folks of color to have a much more proactive approach to education. We cannot keep counting on these democratic institutions to hold on. And so we have to push back against this extremism. We have to push back against these lies. And yes, it's work. And I know that many of us are tired because we've been fighting for 50, 60 years for civil rights and inclusion and for diversity. And we've been gaslighted by other people. But, we cannot let people ban books.
Mhm.
We cannot allow that. We can't let people ban books on Ruby Bridges. A children's book on Ruby Bridges has been banned. The story of her integrating a 6-year-old girl integrating, talk about that will make people upset. You're right. It will make people upset. But how do you think Ruby felt? Who cares? We should be teaching about if we're going to teach about the founding of Texas and the Alamo, why are we not teaching about Bass Reeves? If we're talking about the founding of the West, how do we not talk about Buffalo Soldiers? But we do it all the time. I taught American history for many years. Y'all are not even in the textbooks. So we have to, as parents, show up to things and go. And I just go, if I had the some of the wealth that some of the Black people have, where I watch where white wealthy folks fund conferences and organizations and all this other kind of stuff, and we still struggle to do that. We still struggle to have these think tanks and these folks that can destroy affirmative action and whine about critical race theory and whine about what they can't define, woke, which was our word. Woke was our word. Woke was about Black people being awake to their own history. And then somehow that got taken over by white folks and they turned it into something else that they can't even define. We have to get angry about this stuff. We have to go, what you're not going to do is, as the kids say, because this is not realistic. We still have young people who don't know what Allensworth is. And I love Allensworth. I could spend hours out there till I remember they got rattlesnakes. And I just kind of go, but why is that an unmanned station? I could get some kids out there to regularly do that. It's a beautiful, rich space. I have so many questions. I want to know how they built that. I want to know how they kept security. How did they keep safety? How did they make crops and things like that? There's all sorts of unanswered questions about Allensworth. I think somebody killed Colonel Allensworth on purpose. I don't think it was an accident. Where is the documentation? I can't wait to get some students out there about how they took the water away and the train, all this kind of stuff. You claimed you hated Black people so much, but you hated to see us prosper. If we were willing to have a town without you in it, but you were afraid of us prospering, that is a whole different discussion. It's not about Allensworth being the first colored town. It's about why wasn't Allensworth left alone to thrive out there in that area? And now it's under assault because they want to take the lands away for some indigenous stuff. We should be all over that. We should be like, oh no, you're not. You're not going to do that. So, we're slightly doing better. I will make sure that Buffalo Soldier Day is a big deal in July. But it's like Juneteenth. We're still struggling with Juneteenth. And we allow people to commercialize us. There was Juneteenth ice cream and Juneteenth underwear. That's not what people went through for that. Black people specialize in the holy impossible. The first Juneteenth celebration was at a park where the Black folks had to buy the land because discrimination wouldn't allow us to be in the community park. You can't stop people like that. Black history is not going anywhere. It just lies dormant.
Yeah.
But we have a responsibility.
Dr. Salisbury, he asked this question. Now, it's a question, I guess, about imagination. Imagine if you had ethnic studies programs on high school campuses, junior high campuses? What could it possibly look like? And is this something that is feasible in your
Oh,
opinion?
it's most certainly feasible, and it would be amazing and fun. There's an ad campaign that has started in the last few years called "Because of Them We Can,"
Mhm.
and it is pictures of young people dressed up as Black historical figures. And boy, would I love to see something like that ran on a regular program. Could you? Larry Fong, who was actually the head of the Filipino farm workers, who actually pushed the farm worker boycott, that's gotten forgotten because he wasn't he wasn't a great orator. He was a hardworking man who basically said, let's get out here, let's strike. And he applied the pressure to Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and the Latino farm workers that you had to get out there. They didn't have a choice. Could you imagine having one of his people, one of his descendants come out there and show them what, because the most powerful thing to me with Dolores Huerta, she comes to CSUB quite a bit, but one of the most powerful things about her is when she talks about how she lived like the farm workers live. She didn't come into their community and tell them how to be. She came in their community and she was like them. And watch her emotion about how she had to sacrifice for her kids, and her kids didn't have what they wanted because she basically took a vow of poverty. Wow, how powerful is that? You know, to see the Buffalo Soldiers, I'm like a little kid. To come into this meeting and to see you guys with the uniforms on, the stuff in the background, that the nerd in me, the blurred in me, what we call Black nerds, I'm just excited. That's just the kind of stuff I love. That's the kind of stuff I love to see. I would love to see the little, like when you go to the Civil War Park, the battles that you guys may have fought historically and the strategy. You know, let's talk about Buffalo Soldiers like you talk about Stonewall Jackson and General Lee. I want to hear the strategies. That was work to that.
Yeah.
How did they train? It's like when you teach kids about the Tuskegee Airmen and the exact discipline that it didn't matter if you were a great pilot, but if you did not meet their discipline codes, you were out. Because they understood what it meant to be disciplined.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we don't talk about the female postal workers in World War II who were overseas. We don't talk about them. You don't call people the Harlem Hellfighters if they wasn't given hell. So why are they called that?
Yeah.
You know, there's such a richness
Yes.
in our history that I would love to see, you know, young people, if you put this in them, they're going to ask questions. They're going to want to know, you know, and it's like, we want to tell sanitized stories about Jackie Robinson. And we need to tell the real deal about Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson is one of my big heroes. I mean, that man gave everything to desegregate baseball. And people need to understand he died at 58 years old. You know, I'm coming up on that. I'll be 58 in April. And I'm looking at that, and he looked like he was 80. And that's what that sacrifice did to him. Most people don't know that as a soldier, he participated in the bus boycotts, nearly got kicked out of the military over that, but stood on his principle. He was one of the few that ever stood up and told Malcolm X off. You don't tell Malcolm X off, but Jackie Robinson did that. You know, Jackie Robinson till the very end. I go to Jackie Robinson Day every year. And we need to really realize what that sacrifice is. That's why they're now trying to ban the books on Roberto Clemente, because they don't want to talk about what Roberto Clemente did. You know, if we allow them to erase us, we have a problem. You know, so I'll keep saying this. We have an obligation. And, you know, and we need to get after our teachers more. We need to get after our college professors more and say, yeah, I know you're doing a lot, but you need to come out there to that church and do that talk. You need to go out there to this group that invited you and do that talk. Because the word of mouth, you don't know which kid you're going to inspire. You don't know which 40 or 50-year-old who didn't finish college will be inspired and go back. So yeah, we would love to have y'all come sit in class. That when you ask, that's wonderful. You could always come and sit in my class. Knowing my faculty, you could always come and sit in their class and see how we teach and see what is amazing about it. So you can go to these school boards and tell them, you know, y'all lying up in here. You know, this teaching is terrible. You know, they teach practically every in some of these high schools teach every battle of the Civil War and then never mention the Buffalo Soldiers? How many battles you got to hear about the Civil War?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, come
So-
on. Don't talk about Reconstruction. Don't talk about the 13 Black senators. Ever. Most people don't know we had 13 Black senators. We got one, and he's a clown.
Yeah.
But
So,
Dr.
so
Salzman,
doctors, no,
are the teachers, say on the high school and the elementary and junior high level, are they being handicapped or their hands tied behind their back when it comes to teaching Black history? Because we go out to the elementary schools, the junior highs, and the high school, and we were teaching, and we still do, teaching Black history. And it was a shock to me at the end of our discussions when teachers came up to us and said, I didn't know that. Why?
Well, part of it is the training process. You know, they have to do lesson plans. Once again, it costs money. We need to be out here in these history databases. We need to be out here pushing these training programs. CSUB has a wonderful teacher education program that is doing what they call urban residencies, getting more Black teachers. We need more Black male teachers. You know, you need much more training to learn how to teach with the changing the narrative. That's my thing, as I love to say, is changing the narrative. And you need to get after some of these white young teachers who are very good in the classroom, but what we call cultural pedagogy, so they can learn how to teach to children of color. You know, kids of color are fascinated. You know, it's the church effect. You know, you say amen. We may sit there as young kids of color, and when you're talking and we're really getting a lesson, we're going to talk. We're going to go, yes. And it's not you telling us to be quiet. That's engagement. So we need you to know that's how we engage. We need you to go that we might clap and we might laugh along with what you are telling us because it's exciting, because we've never heard about it. When we talk about, oh, there's not a lot of kids of color in STEM. Well, do you teach about George Washington Carver? You know, I don't know if you do. Do you teach about Black scientists? I don't know if you do. You teach the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. That's the definition of insanity. But when we tell you to change a lesson, changing lesson plans in K through 12 is hard. So that's why we need to be there to start changing those lesson plans, because we are always just first telling people, but never give up. You always got to be there. You got to get after folks like me to say, well, where's my invitation? You know, Miss D. Slade has been getting after me. We've been trying to get you on this podcast, this and that. I love it. You know, and so when I see her, and oftentimes she's the only sister in a room in a very powerful space at CSUB, it's very important. And she's the first person I go greet because she's doing a service there. And so we understand that we're spreading people thin and they're in certain spaces. And my job is to teach my younger faculty that you have a responsibility to be there, to be at different spaces, to tell your story. You know, Latinx kids want to know more than Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. That does not mean they're less heroes, but they want to hear about other people. You know, when I teach my Asian American students about Tim Tanaway, the most decorated Asian American in World War II, who fought in World War II while his family was interned in an internment camp. What does that say? You know, this allows them to let the world turn in their mind and to come up with critical thinking. What do these things mean? What does it mean? You know, one of the things when I do teach the Buffalo Soldiers is, what does it mean that the Buffalo Soldiers were so well respected by the indigenous folks, but may have been responsible for helping get rid of them, put them in such a negative space in the world? Indigenous people are probably the most endangered people in the world, that they are in a space in America, that they are in a space that they could easily be wiped out. And, you know, but it was the responsibility, the belief of, you know, of who you did that. We don't talk about that conflict and that how the Buffalo Soldiers are not blamed. You're not blamed in history. There's respect there. That's an interesting discussion.
Mm.
But that's because Buffalo Soldiers didn't engage in atrocities. They didn't engage in racial hatred because they understood that. It was a job. It was a duty. Language is very important. Young people need to know what words mean. Actually, all people need to know what words mean.
My last question, Dr. Salisbury. If you had a group of parents from an inner city and who would like for their children to be enlightened more in their public school classrooms, etc., what would you say to that group of parents regarding the importance of ethnic studies at their levels?
I would say it's even more important than ethnic studies. I would say it's just learning in general is important.
Okay.
I would plan some things where, it's tough, but I would plan some things. There'd be a family dinner.
Mm-hmm.
We have it. Once a month, you could do that.
Okay.
Once every 2 months, you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest things of being a park ranger was when you could tell there were Black family reunions in the area, particularly in the tri-state area, Virginia, DC, and Maryland. And they would come to the Civil War Park. And that was because they were going to learn something new. And you could see whatever Big Mama or TT had arranged that, and everybody was rolling their eyes. But then when you started having this conversation and whether they were learning about Civil War medicine, I'd throw something in there about the Black Civil War journalist, Martin Delaney. And they'd be like, there were Black journalists in the Civil War and there was Black nurses in the Civil War. And I said, well, how do you think we got the word? Who do you think took care of our soldiers? Okay. And so, then there'd be all these questions. And then also, once again, about training. They have genetic histories kept at Civil War parks. And it would always happen at least once a week where we would have a Black family come in and one of my white colleagues would say, we didn't keep the genealogy history of slaves. And that guest would have to say, well, my uncle, blah, 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 fought in the Civil War and he wasn't a slave. And you would see that look on their faces. These were Rangers that thought they were the elitist in telling this story of the Civil War, but they couldn't get out of their brains that because of miscegenation, because of race mixing, because of sexual assault, that you could conceivably, as a Black person, have somebody in your family that fought in the Civil War who may have been passing. We don't collect the genealogy information of the Black soldiers. Okay? Y'all don't know this till you get there. There's only a handful of Black Rangers. It's an amazing job. I'm going to be working very hard to get a lot more of my young people. Number one, it pays tremendously well. They give you a uniform. You get that cool Smokey the Bear hat. You get a badge for a while. You could go to any park in the nation for free. I didn't know anything about the Civil War really until I took a class. I was a doctoral student. And they told us we could read any book they had in their library. Oh, I got my hands on anything. There's a couple of books on y'all, but that's how I learned a lot of detail. Opportunity. What I would say to parents, what is your opportunity? What is the opportunity for your kid to do something, to be something different? One of the things is sometimes being in uncomfortable spaces. I was a Girl Scout. It's not always comfortable to be a Girl Scout. It's not always comfortable to be a Boy Scout. But learn some new things. Go out and learn how to fish. Some of these things you could do as group activities, particularly here in Kern County. Yeah, we could do those things. It's just like Black folks and, more Black folks are picking up guns and learning how to properly use them and how to properly store them. Because white people talk about the Second Amendment all the time. How come Black people aren't talking about it? The Deacons of Defense, the Buffalo Soldiers, the Black Civil War soldiers, they all kept that because they understood understand the proper purpose of defense. We pretend like we don't know how to survive. We've been surviving a long time.
Mm-hmm.
What we are getting is that we are getting out of touch with nobody's really feeling everyday pressure. That's why you talk to the elders, because you think the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s was a long time ago. It was not. It's an eye blink in history. But we don't feel that everyday pressure. Some of us have tremendous privilege. So that's what we have to remind people. is that we have always moved together as a group of people. We may not have all had everything we wanted, but we always had everything we needed. So as people, we need to not leave people behind because some of us are enjoying better paths to success than others.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we have a purpose.
We'll turn it back over to Captain Stowe, who will wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salisbury. This was a truly enlightening conversation. And I want to thank you to the Buffalo Soldiers for your participation and your questions. This sounds like one of those podcasts we'll probably need to do again sometime.
It would be my pleasure, and I'll be happy to bring my whole faculty so you can meet these dynamic folks. We are going to be amazing. You are going to hear from us. And actually now I've already been inspired. I think I'm going to see if I can wangle a dinner or a lunch. I'll have to talk with Ms. Slade and you guys and figure out how we can invite y'all to have a community conversation dinner, and that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to Brigadier General Sandifer.
All right. Thank you again, Buffalo Soldiers, Major General Slade, Brigadier General Everly, Captain LaShawna Stowe, and our special guest, Dr. Tracy Salisbury. One thing, Dr. Tracy Salisbury, I really like your passion. I've listened to you in certain meetings that I've been in at Cal State, and you're always bringing it. You know what I mean? You're not singing it, you're bringing it, and that's a real good thing that I love about you, your personality, your passion for ethnic studies, Black history, all of that. I think is tremendous. One thing I would like to probably have a discussion with you. You mentioned one of the generals. What's his name again? Stonewall Jackson.
Stonewall Jackson.
Yeah, one of my favorite generals was Stonewall. And I've always compared Stonewall Jackson to Robert E. Lee, who was the greatest or the better man, the better general. I'd probably like to have that discussion with you.
Oh, I would love to have that discussion with you, sir.
And then contrast General Ulysses Grant.
Yes.
Where does he fit in the picture? So,
and they were all such wild characters. Yeah. But I'm waiting to be invited to sign up as a private in the Buffalo Soldiers so I can work my way up before I get too old.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And we appreciate you. We look forward to working with you. Keep us in the loop.
All right. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone else, and hope
make
you
sure
guys
I get a copy of the podcast.
Oh yes, Major General Slade will make sure that happens. He'll make sure that happens. So thank you all again, and have a good rest of the day and a great weekend.